Welcome back to the Girl Out of Order podcast. Today, and we have such a treat today. I have been so excited about this interview for ever since she said yes. So today I want you to get your journals. I want you to get your favorite pens and a box of Kleenex because we have one of the most unique guests I've ever had on this podcast. And she's going to be talking about a topic that a lot of us like to avoid, or we know it's there, but we kind of just we want to push it aside because it makes us feel a little bit uncomfortable. Well, we're not doing that, and we don't do that at Girl Out of Order. So today, I am so honored to bring you the incredible Sabrina Oso. She is one of the most determined, resilient women that I have ever had the pleasure of getting to know and researching and watching. She's the founder and CEO of what is called Oso Safe, and her focus and mission is about helping people, helping families and children feel safe where they live, where they learn, where they work, and where they play. She is a TEDx speaker, author, and real estate agent focused on creating and maintaining respect in your homes, your workplaces, and importantly, your schools for the children. Sabrina's personal and professional experience has equipped her on the subject of home violence. It allows her to bring a unique and holistic approach as a solution. So she's not about talking about it, she's about doing something about home violence. Because she has such a unique approach, I am particularly excited to bring her to our community. Sabrina focuses on a combination of both education and technology through her core product called the Oso Safe Certification for properties, which entails the Oso Safe Home Sweet Home package for both property owners and, importantly, property managers and landlords. And she also has a unique certification through her children's book called Home Safe Home for You and Me. And this book is such a beautiful tool to help children be educated, laying the groundwork for respect and safety. Interestingly, Sabrina is a professional dancer and teacher who also incorporates her performance abilities to educate on this subject. So I am so pleased to welcome to the Girl Out of Order podcast, Sabrina Oso. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Christine. What a great introduction. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, Sabrina, we had a chance just to chat briefly before we hopped on the recording today. And I am, it's not, it doesn't feel congruent to say I'm excited to bring you to our audience, but I am so honored to bring you and your message to our audience. It is such an important topic, the topic of home violence. And I love the fact that you don't call it domestic violence, you call it home violence. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. But before we do, I want you just to take a moment to tell our listeners what you want them to know about you, Sabrina Oso, the individual. What would you like us to know about you?
We're working as fast as we can. We're working as fast as we can to get uh, all of us safe at home. And it has to do with respect. That's the main ingredient. So um, I want people to know that your audience, your listeners, and uh, it's the foundation of everything. So, um, yeah, I hope I answered the question.
Well, let me ask it a different way because I want to get into your mission absolutely with Oso Safe. I want to get into your passion about fighting and advocating for people who are suffering from home violence. But what I want our listeners to know before we dive in is I want them to know who you are as a person. Tell us a little bit about your story as much as you're comfortable so that people can get a
Sure.
flavor of we're going to get into your why, but I have a very strong hallucination that your why is really woven in with your who. Who is Sabrina Oso?
Yes. Well, at my core, I am a dancer. At my core, I'm a dancer. And unfortunately, living how I did in my home, I couldn't even mention dance. I couldn't talk about dance because I am a survivor of violence. My father beat my mother on a regular basis. My mother would beat me. So I know firsthand how painful that is and how traumatic it is. And I couldn't even mention the word dance. I really had no choice growing up, and I know you, unfortunately, too many of us have that common thread of violence, abuse, chaos, dysfunction. Too many of us, and I've had enough therapy to be comfortable to say that, like I said, I'm a survivor of violence. I know firsthand how traumatic it is. So, and I want people to know that I guess maybe I want people to know that I understand. I understand. I get it. Because I lived it. I lived it. Especially as a child, it's so painful. And Oso Safe was really born out of a one woman show that I wrote, choreographed, and performed with my students at the time because I taught dance for 10 years. And so it's about turning pain into power,
I love that.
really.
I love that. So much of what we do at Girl Out of Order is helping women find their way back to their true identities, really pulling back the layers and reclaiming their stories and embracing their unique selves who they've often either lost sight of, it was squelched out of them, or it's been a slow erosion over time. And so I love the fact that you have taken this very painful childhood, which first of all, I honor you and I hear you and thank you for being brave to share that story because we have three pillars at Girl Out of Order, and our first pillar is so pivotal for what we're talking about today, and it's about cultivating bravery in women. We have to get brave. We have to be courageous to tell our stories. And it is hard. And it's sometimes so scary to step out of the shadows that your story has put you in. Don't you agree?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yes, and I have been doing many videos, and we could discuss this further along in the interview, but to get kids, children to speak out, to be brave, to speak out. And I know it's hard. I say that too in the video. We know it's hard. We know it's difficult, but it's the first step. And yes, you're going to get beaten even more. You're going to be threatened even more. They're going to lock you in your room even more. The more they abuse you, the louder you have to get. I know that sounds weird, but
Mm.
that's the only way that that we could get on the road to safety, to healing, to being a solution or getting to a solution, probably I should say. And I know it, like you said, it takes tremendous bravery, tremendous courage, tremendous oomph, if you
Oh, I
will.
love that. It's so interesting because I was telling you before we got on here that I've listened to a number of the podcasts you've been on. I watched all the videos you sent me. I was enraptured. My husband came out last night on the porch and he's like, "What are you watching?" I'm like, I can't get enough. I can't get enough of this woman. Her passion just oozes out of her. And so I want to go back to something that you said about, the bravery, the courage to speak out, even though you know there's going to be consequences. And I want to ask you about your personal story. There had to be a point in time where, and again, I shouldn't assume, but for sake of the question, let me assume a little bit that there had to be a point in time where you said, enough. Pardon my language, I'm fucking done. It ends today and I'm changing directions. Can you tell us about what it was that was finally the end for you where you said enough?
Uh, Therapy. Therapy was a big part of why um, I left my house at 21. I left. I did what I was supposed to do. I went to college. I got my degree, and I got the jobs. But I was so unhappy. I was so unhappy. And my therapist said, Sabrina, you're a dancer. You have to go for it. You're a dancer. You couldn't do it when you were living at home. And now that you moved out, you really should pursue it. So that's what I did. And luckily I live in close proximity to New York. So I was auditioning, I trained, I was taking 12 classes a week. And I have to say, with therapy, I allowed myself the permission to be free, finally. Because
Mm,
with dance, I I wasn't free to dance at home. I was putting out fires. I had to stifle myself. I had to shut up about myself. So it wasn't until I moved out, and that was at 21. I got
mm,
my car, I got my job, and I moved out. I got an apartment. So and it was at 21 years old, and I just kind of took the bull by the horns, and I said to myself, uh no more stealing. That's it. No more stealing of my life. My parents,
mm.
the relatives that knew that was going on, and they never stepped in. They never said, Sabrina, you could come to us. We know what's going on. It's not your fault. You're not alone. Christine, I want to say no one came to my rescue. No one. And I hate them for it. You know, they knew what was going on, and not one of them ever said to me, even the neighbors, they knew the police would come to the house yelling and screaming. My father, you could hear him outside. You could hear him from even, I would say, across the street. I mean, no one ever, I'm going to start crying. No one ever stepped in and said, Sabrina, you could come to us. No one ever stuck up for me. I was alone. I was completely alone. And yeah, so this is why Oso Safe, we make it a point to say to all children, you're not alone. It's not your fault. We'll see to it that things get better. You're not crazy because
Yeah.
your abusive parents, your abusive step parents, your abusive family members will say to you, it's you. You're the problem. You made me hit you. You made me talk, humiliate you in front of everybody. You're the problem. You're shit. You know, you're the one who's making me abuse you. And it's so wrong. So we want to say, to children, it's not you. It's them. It's your parents, your abusive step parents, your abusive family members. So I'm sorry if I'm going off on a tangent, but it was therapy that got me to have the courage to leave. And my therapist said to me, because I was afraid to leave. It wasn't like, oh yeah, I can't wait. I was afraid to leave. I was 21. My father would say to me, you're not going to make it on your own. You need me. It's
Mm-hmm.
that control, right? It's, you need me. What do you mean you're going to go? Who's going to pay for your insurance? Who's going to pay for your car? All the noise, right? All of the noise.
Right.
And and my therapist said to me, I'll never forget it. Sabrina, there's always going to be a reason to stay. And when she said that to me, a light bulb went off in my head like, yeah, you're always going to want to stay, but your life will continue to be stolen.
Yes.
So um so and 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 when I was able I should say, therapy, when I moved out, I was a heavy duty club. I love the club scene. My favorite kind of music is techno, house, tribal,
Yeah.
trance. And I was dancing. I was going out. I was going out all night, every weekend. I hit all of the New York City clubs: Palladium, Limelight, Club USA, Twilo, Tunnel, Webster Hall. I loved it. And I felt so free, Christine, when I was clubbing and just on that dance floor. It was so great. And then I was dancing. I took classes. I was heavy duty training, but at the same time I felt like my parents took so much away from me. And I realized they also were victims, right? Uh, Whoever abuses is also a victim. We get it. But you have to come to a point in your life where you say, I'm not going to make the same mistakes as my parents. You know, you
Right.
have to take responsibility for your life. You
Mhm.
can't you can't play the abuser card and say, "Oh, well, I was abused, so I'm going to abuse my kids or I'm going to abuse my partner." That's
Right.
nonsense. You have to break the cycle.
Yeah, that sounds like, I mean, and obviously that's exactly what you're doing. That's what your life is exemplifying. There's so much to unpack here. I'm trying to decide where to go next because there's so much I
Sure,
want to
sure.
unpack. So I'm going to ask you what might be a really hard question. And just like every guest, if there's something that you're not in a place where you want to talk about, please use your voice on that. So how are you with Oso Safe? Because I mean, it's one thing we can stand there and we can point the fingers and say judges are terrible, the system is terrible. That we can do that. That's not going to effectuate change. Is there anything in Oso Safe that is uniquely educating or advocating within the legal system, because the reality is that system is here to stay? So is there anything in your mission, in your business, that is getting into the legal system and the child protection services system that is helping educate? Are they open? Are they not open?
So safe. We are saying let's make respect a required standard condition of residency, which means that when you sign any um, whether you rent, whether you own, whether you have a mortgage or not. Let's make respect a required standard. And if you are abusive in any way, verbal, physical, sexual abuse, you, the abuser only, gets immediately evicted from the premises. And we go into full knowledge knowing that that would be the consequences. So we have it as an addendum, and this is all copywritten. This is all trademarked with my company. We have a policy that is an addendum to existing leases, to existing um, uh, title, if you will, on homes. Because if you think about it, every crime that happens with home violence happens in some type of residence. Whether you live in a townhouse, a co-op, a condo, a single family home, a multifamily dwelling, a two-family home, a villa, a mansion, a mobile home, it doesn't matter. Even a dormitory, a senior community, it happens in some type of residence. It needs to come out of the courts and it has to be resolved right in residency, which is what we do at Oso Safe with our Oso Safe certifications, and more specifically our Oso Safe Home Sweet Home package, which we are marketing to the real estate industry. So we're saying right now we are marketing this to the landlord tenant portion of the industry, but we want this to propagate over all residency.
Mhm.
So whether you own your home, whether you rent it, whether you're a property owner, a property manager, the goal with us in the near future that it shouldn't matter. But for the sake of the path of least resistance, we're saying for landlords and tenants, hire us, we'll get your property Oso Safe certified. What does that mean? They purchase the Oso Safe Home Sweet Home
Mhm.
package. It consists of a policy, a seminar, an app, and therapists assigned to the property. I can go into a summary in each of those components. Just to a brief explanation. The policy basically states, as I said, I, as a landlord, I promise to provide you a safe space for you to live. You, in turn, as my tenant, you promise to not act in any way, shape, or form abusively. Otherwise, you, the abuser only, gets immediately evicted from the premises. And we go into full knowledge knowing that that would be the consequences. So there's no surprise.
Sabrina,
And
question.
another portion of the policy,
I'm so sorry. I
sure,
did not mean to interrupt you, but you said something really important, and I want to highlight it if I may, because it's
sure.
something you said. You, the abuser, only gets evicted. Now my legal brain is going right. I'm thinking of all the ways that this could be tricky legally. But let's put all that aside, because what you said is so important, and it goes back to another one of these questions I really wanted to ask you. Because in your TEDx talk, you titled it I'm going to bungle a little bit, but you basically said that victims shouldn't leave. They should stay. And what you just said makes me wonder if you could expound on that message that you are giving to victims. Don't leave. And I'm not talking about the statistics about, obviously, the statistics are terrifying that women are most in danger when they leave. That's not what I'm talking about. I just want you to tell us what that message means.
If you're the victim, and this is something I thought long and hard about when I was designing my business, when I was creating these products, why should you leave? You're the victim. And for the sake, and we at Oso Safe, we don't always assume that the victim is female. It could be that the victim is male. Who is a 100% victim, though, is the child. So we're saying, why should you leave? You're the one that is being attacked, verbal, physical, sexual abuse, your children. So you stay right where you are. It's the abuser that has to go because you have to keep integrity of the rest of the property, if you will, whether it's one family or multiple units. Bad news travels fast. And then before you know it, your well behaved, safe practicing residents leave. We're looking to flip all of that. Why should they leave? It's the abuser that has to go and not come back.
Mm-hmm.
So the title of that I did for my TEDx talk, yes, we're looking to flip the script in residency. You stay right where you are. Why should you uproot the kids, remove them from the school? You're running around like a chicken with its head cut off. You're running around like a refugee. You're going to a shelter. No, you stay right where you are. It's the abuser that has to go and not come back. So this is what we have in our policy. And if I could just elaborate, even explain the seminar, because people have to be educated on what constitutes abuse,
Mm-hmm.
what constitutes a good relationship. A lot of us don't
Right.
know. We assume that we know, we give birth, we have a baby. Here's the baby. Okay, this is how you breastfeed it, dad. This is how you burp it. But what about safety? What
Right.
about respect? Are you going to beat the crap out of each other? Oh, you have to be educated on practicing respect, practicing positivity, empowerment, encouragement, freedom of choice. So this is the education portion of what we do at Oso Safe. It's the second component of the certification of the package, if you will, the Oso Safe Home Sweet Home package. People have to be
Right.
educated. Um, and I want to say another important component of this is we do not wait until children are 18 years of age for them to have agency over their lives. Quite frankly, Christine, it's way too late. Children know who make them feel safe. They know who, if mom and dad are both dangerous, if they're both abusive, well, why not get the kid to who they feel safe with, an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, a close family friend? Why wait until they're 18 years of age? Children know who make them feel safe. They know who respects them from a very young age. And with the book, with the certification, with the package, we are empowering them. We're giving them voice and choice over their
Yes.
lives. So, and we know that they can lie. We know that. We know that they can lie like, yeah, I'm safe with mom and dad. But rest assured, and you and I both know this as
Mm-hmm.
survivors, abusers can only keep their poker face on for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Then their abusive true colors do come out
Yes.
sooner than later. They could have their how do you say, they could keep their like I said, their poker face maybe for a month,
Mm-hmm.
a week, a couple of days, but rest assured they will be abusive. It'll come out. They're not quiet people, abusers. In fact, they love it when they have an audience, quite frankly, especially children. It's the me monster effect. Like, look at me, I'm making you scared. So Um, so this is we're empowering children because I have to say the laws, the courts, the judges, the child protective service agencies, they fail them over and over again. So we at Oso Safe, we focus on the child. We focus on getting them to speak out on behalf of their own abuse. And in fact, we're saying at Oso Safe, don't go home. Don't go home. Home is hell. Home is not a safe place. Don't go home. Stay at school and say your cheer. I want to live where I am Oso safe, and I am Oso safe with an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, a close family friend. And if you have no one, be patient. We're working as fast as we can. We will take you in. But for now, if you have that person that will take you in, an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, a close family friend, say who that is and don't go home. Say to your teachers, to your principal, to the superintendent, I'm not going home. I'm staying right here. Attach yourself to a school desk. Attach yourself to the auditorium, to the school cafeteria. I'm not going home. Dad beats me up. Mom beats me up. Uh, I got sexually abused yesterday. Don't go home. So it's about empowering these kids because these kids go home to hell. Um, and I know it's avant-garde, it's progressive, and I know teachers are afraid to say anything. They'll call child protective services. They don't want to lose their jobs. But I'm here to tell you, if we don't ruffle the feathers and rock the boats, it's going to stay the same.
Yeah.
5 children a day are killed in this country alone, in the US, just the ones that we know about, at the hands of an abusive parent under the watch, usually, of a child protective service agency.
Mm-hmm.
The hell with it all. Get the kids empowered, which is what we do at Oso Safe.
Can I
We're
jump
getting
in
them
here
to
real
speak
quick?
out. Go
Jump
ahead.
in because oh, I'm just enraptured with everything you're saying. But I want to circle back because I think it's really important that our listeners can take a step back and I want to unpack the word abuse. Because as somebody who is in the family law system and deals a lot with orders of protection, we litigate the issue of abuse. And I think, well, I don't think, I know that there is often a misunderstanding of what constitutes abuse. And I have sat on the other side of my legal desk from women with a black eye or a bruised arm on their 50th wedding anniversary or their arm in their sling. And it's at that point where they are recognizing I've been abused. And as I work with these women and I pull apart their stories, it's not like all of a sudden one day he hits her or he breaks her arm. It's this evolution, this escalation of activities and denigrating words and put downs that eventually culminates in physical abuse. So I'd like you to talk and educate. You talked about education. I think that is critical when it comes to home violence of any kind. Is what when you talk about abuse, let's set aside for the purposes of your answer the obvious, right? The smacking, the pushing, the shoving, the hitting, the rape. Let's put that aside because I don't think there's not really a dispute that when those things happen, very few people, unless they're really off up there, would say that's not abuse. But let's talk about the more subtle forms of abuse so we can help our listeners recognize it, God forbid, in their own homes, but maybe in the homes of people they love. So, how would you flesh out abuse, putting aside the obvious?
The definition of abuse is a pattern of forceful behavior, and it is in cycles, but there's always warning signs. Always, 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 always. There's always warning signs. And at first, they are
Right.
subtle. For example, you're dating someone. And I say this on my TikTok and on my YouTube because that's dedicated to kids, and kids are dating, they're experimenting.
Mm-hmm.
You are attracted to someone. Oh, I like him, I like her. Whatever your sexual orientation is, it's irrelevant. Um, wow. They always pay. Great. They always pay. But that could be a red flag. That could be where they're trying to control you financially and then they guilt you for it. Well, I paid for lunch, I paid for dinner, I paid for ice cream, I paid for a coffee, a tea.
Mm,
So as soon you have to be in tune to when you feel creeped out, when you feel like,
yes.
whoa, that felt off. That's all it takes. I felt off. When someone is saying to you, wow, I love how you look, but can you make the skirt longer? Can you put your shirts up to here because I want you all to myself. I don't want anyone looking at
Yes.
you. That's a red flag. Because if they met you where you have style, you have a sense of fashion, you like, for men and women, men they like to show their muscles or whatever, and women they have their legs, they have their breasts, they have whatever. And you're not out there naked. And quite frankly, even if you're naked, nothing should happen to you. Nothing should happen to you, for crying out loud. No one has the right to rape you or sexually assault you, even if you're naked. But just for to keep our conversation simple, um, those are red flags when they try to control how you're
Mm-hmm.
dressed. And isolation is another big one. You have
Yes.
friends, you have your family, and then, oh, I don't want you hanging out with so and so. They made me feel bad the other day.
Yes.
Can you not hang out with them? These are subtle. They're roping you in. They're roping you in.
Mm-hmm.
And at first you could think, oh wow, yes. Meanwhile, you've been friends with that person for years, or you've been um you're close with your sister or your brother for forever. But all of a sudden, oh no, sis, brother, friend, I can't hang out with you. Let's postpone it. And then the postponing turns into, wow, you haven't seen that person in weeks, months. Those are all red flags. The isolation. Um,
Sabrina, I was
sure.
going to say, just because this is something that you said and really stuck out to me when you said made you feel off. I've told all four of my daughters, and they could repeat it to this day. God gave us tummies to send us warning signals, and my little girls would rub their tummies. And if your tummy feels funny in a situation, you tell a trusted adult. And they have, to this day, I've had them come to me and say, especially one of my daughters in particular, she's just navigating the dating scene, trying to figure out who she's, and it hasn't risen to the level of abuse, but it's the level of discomfort. And she said, Mom, my stomach didn't feel right. And I was like, oh, thank God. Like, it's in, you're seeing it in action. So it's about equipping our children to listen to their tummies, because our stomachs send us signals that tells us you're not safe, this isn't right. And it's when we get to the point where we can educate them young, they're gonna run. They're not gonna find themselves in these situations because they're gonna listen to those signals.
Excellent point. Yes. And I've been telling parents you have to educate them young. And I've said this to my niece since she was teeny tiny. Um, when you get bigger and you have boyfriends, they have to be good to you and you have to be good to them. If they're not good to you, you say bye bye. And I would give examples of what do you mean by good to you. So if they get you flowers and if you feel safe around them and you feel like you could listen to them and they listen to you, these are all good signs. In fact, I just did a post just today. It's not, I didn't broadcast it yet, but where you are respected. The key word is respected. As soon as that boundary is crossed, You have to say bye-bye. You have to break it off.
Mhm.
And we have to tell our kids over and over again, you deserve to be in a good relationship. You deserve to be in a good relationship. You deserve to be with a good person. So as soon as they make you feel you're not good enough, you made me do this to you. Even something could be subtle like a shove, and that's not subtle. But like, oh, and the person could make it come off as, oh, I didn't mean to do that. Yes, you did. You have to say bye bye. You have to break it off immediately. And that there's other people worthy of your company, of your companionship. Um, so I like what you said with, yeah, your stomach, your gut. That's your gut, right? Your gut feeling. I hope I gave enough examples of what constitutes a good relationship, and what of the warning signs of a bad relationship, like where you see the warning signs and the red flags. And we have to get over, so many parents are embarrassed by, oh, I can't talk about this with my kid. Well, let me tell you something. If you don't talk about it with your child, they will learn it from pornography, and they will learn it from their peers. And if their peers come from bad homes, uh, homes that are not safe, well, your kid is learning bad stuff, to put it simply. And I want to say on your show that pornography is a big driver of violence, and we cannot underestimate how much children are exposed to pornography from a very young age, as young as 8 years old, 6 years old, uh, teen years. And I have to say, Christine, not all men are bad, and not all women are good. So,
I received an email recently from a gentleman that I represented 10 years ago. His name came through and I was like, oh, I recognized it, but I had kind of forgotten the details. And he sent me the most beautiful email. And it was about how well his daughters are doing. And I was just in tears. And the reason I bring this up is because when I started to pull back the layers of my case with him years ago, you remember that man I told you about who murdered his 5-year-old? He had actually represented this gentleman's ex. And this woman was abusive to my client. And she would beat him with a broomstick where you couldn't see it. And as a man, he was so filled with shame that he didn't tell anybody except me. And he didn't want me to bring it into court because he was just, as a man, it had just different types of shame. I mean, shame is the greatest tool of the devil of home violence. It just is. And so I wanted to highlight that with what you were saying, because this is a podcast for women, but the reality is abuse happens on both sides. Is it disproportionately to women? Of course, there's biological realities and societal realities we're dealing with. But I want to make sure, especially if you're not experiencing it, but you know in your gut it's happening somewhere, ask the fucking questions. Ask the questions and be a safe place for men and women to talk openly about what is happening in their homes.
yes.
Period. End of story.
Yes, yes, I agree. And that's why in my TEDx talk, as you pointed out, I say home violence, because domestic violence, when you say that, it has such a stigma that it is a woman's problem, and clearly it is not. And secondly, it assumes that all of the victims are female, and that's not true either. 1 out of 7 men is abused. That's that statistic right there. So,
Yes.
and abuse is abuse. It doesn't matter the gender that the hand occupies. It's horrible either way. So if dad is beating up mom, or mom is beating up dad, it's horrific, horrific. So I built my business with that in mind, that it's whoever is the abuser could be male or female, and the victim could be male or female. We're going to help whoever is the victim, especially children, because children are automatic victims. So
Well, I think really what it boils down to, Sabrina, is it's about awareness. It's
yeah,
about paying attention. Because if
right,
we're paying attention,
right.
the vast majority of human beings are good, law abiding, loving human beings. And so if we're paying attention and we're aware of what's going on, and I love the fact that you're out there in the schools and doing advocacy and education and giving children a voice and also giving the parents a voice, because a lot of times, like I've said with the women I've represented, they the straw that broke the literal, I guess it's the literal back, sometimes it's the literal arm, was that it went too far, but it had been building for years. And so it's about awareness, it's about education, and it's about advocacy, which I love. So as we kind of bring this around to a close, I have a couple really important questions, and I want you to give our our listeners, maybe they were reading the transcript, our listeners some tools here. So what advice, Sabrina, would you have? You're sitting there and you're across the coffee shop table with a gal, and she comes to you, and because I know what I would say as an attorney, but as an advocate, I am in this situation. I feel trapped in this cycle of abuse. What advice do you have for her? How does she get out of it? How does she break free? How does she get safe? What would you say to her?
Well, I want to say, and it is worth saying, get us into your residence. We will get the property Oso Safe certified. Let's get our services into your residency, whatever that may be, the different types of residents that are out there, residency. Because if we don't make respect a required standard condition of residency, nothing is going to change. Nothing, let's put it on paper. That would be one of the answers, because we combine education and technology to empower everybody, even if you're in a safe relationship. It's not going to hurt to reinforce what you already know about respect, positivity, empowerment, encouragement, freedom of choice. My other suggestion is, don't blame yourself, because no victim invites abuse. Your abuser, you're one of many victims of your abuser, one of many victims, so don't blame yourself. The victim will blame himself, herself. So I would say, get therapy as soon as possible. And you're going to go through the noise of, but I can't afford it. What's therapy going to do for me? What if somebody finds out? That's all noise, because a good therapist will open your eyes and see, and make you see, oh my gosh, I am in an abusive relationships, or in an abusive relationship, or I can get him or her out, or wow, my kids are suffering. I don't want this for them. So it'll get you to open your eyes. Um, I don't believe, and I have personal and professional experience with this. I wish I could say that the courts will help, but they don't. The judges are horrific. And quite frankly, the judges, they keep the violence in place. They perpetuate it, they magnify it. So the judges need to be held accountable for their horrible rulings. So I don't advise for the person to, go to court, call Child Protective Services. I wouldn't advise that. Um, but I hope I answered the question. Get us into the property, go to a therapist, and they have to see their self-worth, that they deserve to be in a good relationship. And maybe that good relationship is to be by themselves for a while. Don't be with anybody, just be by yourself for a while. Um, did I answer the question?
Yeah, you did. And I just want to augment that because from my own experience as a family law attorney, I would tell women who are in this cycle of violence, just like you advocate for children to name a safe person, I would say to these women, mostly women, there, analyze your life, look at your life, even if you've been isolated from somebody that you used to be close to. Is there somebody safe that you can tell? Is there an attorney that you can go to? Because I am a safe place for a lot of these women. And while I understand your perspective that the legal system often fails victims, there are amazing attorneys out there who are fiercely and passionately devoted to advocating for victims of home violence. I am one of them, and I am known for that in my county. And I could point out two other women that come to mind immediately whose office is less than a mile from my house, who are incredible advocates and will walk alongside that legal journey, because oftentimes it involves a divorce. It involves the separating of the family. So what you provide is a very unique service. But there are people like me out there who provide an amazing service as well. So don't give up. If you meet with an attorney and your stomach tells you he or she is not hearing you, like really, really hearing you, then you run from that person, but you keep looking, you keep telling, you keep showing up for yourself, and especially if you have babies, because if it's happening to you, sisters, it's going to happen to them. Even if they aren't stricken with somebody's hand or boot or paddle, they are affected deeply. So then the other thing I would say, the other thing I want to make sure I get out here for our listeners is there are amazing, amazing domestic violence shelters, home violence, call it, they're usually termed in Illinois, which is where I'm based, domestic violence shelters. The one that's local to us is called Turning Point. And Mary Denny is the advocate that's in court. I see her every week. She is a badass. She is always present. And when you talk about therapy, these domestic abuse shelters and advocacy organizations offer free therapy, free group counseling where you can go and get connected with other people going through similar situations. So it's not a matter of just, stepping up, standing out, speaking out. All of that is so important, but it's about taking intelligent action. And I love that. I mean, I feel like you're just such a beautiful compliment to what people like me do. So
Yes, yes,
that's my little spiel on
yes.
that.
No, 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 definitely, definitely. On the East Coast here, I have to say, and we're based in on the East Coast. It's hard to find a good attorney. Do you represent people out of state as well? Like, would you represent,
No.
no, like somebody from New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, because it's hard to find a good attorney around here, I have to say. So I'm glad that we connected because I'll definitely refer you. Absolutely. Because I've had horrible experiences with attorneys that that promised the world, and it actually backfired, where you're even further away from that child. So I definitely, I will refer you, definitely, in Illinois, anyone that's looking for a good attorney that will deliver positive results. They're hard to come by,
Mm-hmm.
Christine, and
Yeah.
your shelter, the shelter that is near you, that's great. I hope I didn't come across as, you know, the hell with the system, but I have to speak from my own experience on the East Coast, and it's been horrendous. It's been horrendous.
Well,
So I'm
yeah.
glad that you're there. I'm glad that you exist, and that you are getting positive results for your clients, because I have to say that's rare. So kudos
Well,
to you.
here's what I would say to that, Sabrina. Here's what I'd say to that. First of all, I think it's a both and. I think it's a, yes, you probably speak for a lot of people who have been victimized by the system. It's not that that doesn't happen here. Oh, it happens here all the time. And what is also true is when we are equipping women and children to advocate for themselves, it's about getting resourceful. And so what I would say to you and the people that, your listeners, your followers, is go to the bar association in the county in which you live and meet with the person who runs the bar association. Tell them, hey, I have a domestic abuse, home violence situation. I need an attorney who is known for being an advocate for victims of abuse. And go to the home violence, domestic violence shelters. The people that run them are not in it to get rich. They're in it because they believe passionately in advocating for people who are trying to survive this scourge of home violence. And you can say to them, who are the attorneys that show up at your benefits? Show up at your fundraisers. Who are the attorneys that are voices for victims? Because I can tell you that these two other women that I'm speaking about right now, and one man that I know, are at every fundraiser, are at every, advocacy dinner, because these people that run these shelters know who's in the safe legal community. So that's what I would say to you and to the people that are following you. Like, there are resources out there, but you have to be dogged. You have to be resilient. You have to be resourceful, and you cannot give up because your voice matters.
I think
So that's what I
yes,
would say.
yes. I think that's the key to not give up, to not give up. Like you said, I appreciate you, and I'm so glad that you exist. And we do have shelters here. I mean, they're national, obviously, nationally. Um, and I think, yeah, to not give up, even though you just want to at times, it's very difficult, and it's a lot of money being spent too, so
Mhm.
when you spend so much money with an attorney that lets you down, you're like at a loss. Like, you have no more money to spend on a good attorney that will defend you, because you spent it on a bad attorney. So that also plays into the whole equation. But
Yeah,
um, uh, I, I, I think it's very important, though, not to give up. Definitely.
100%. Well, I want to honor you for all of your
Me
incredible
too.
work.
Me
I
too.
love the fact that you just got a most beautiful award recently, and I'm stumbling over the name of it. Could you remember Her Story? That's what it was. Okay, so you were just awarded the Her Story Award by the Women's Federation for World Peace. To me, I watched your speech, I watched the award, and I want to honor you and everything that you're doing, because you said something important at the beginning, and I want to wrap up our conversation with it. And you said that I am bringing, I think you said, purpose from my pain. I don't know if you said a different word, but it was another P word.
Uh, uh,
Was it purpose from my
Turning
pain?
pain into power. Yeah.
Pain into
Hmm.
power.
Hmm.
Yes. So I'm also that person, that woman who is living that in my own life. Not only in obviously the podcast and creating this Girl Out of Order community where women are bravely claiming their true identities, reclaiming their safety, their security, their worth. They're boldly living out that new identity, going out into the world and speaking. You are the epitome of boldness. And I'm so grateful that your voice is out there. And the last thing I would say, our third pillar at Girl Out of Order, is we want to build bridges among all women. And you've said a number of times, it doesn't matter who you love, where you're from, how you pray, how you vote. It's so irrelevant, because at the core, we have so much more in common than we do that separates us. And the more we educate women on what is going on in our communities and the lives of our friends, our colleagues, our people we see at the PTA, the soccer field. I mean, I've raised 4 kids. I've sat in more freaking ass cold soccer games and I could tear. I got soccer mamas. You know what? I've represented a number of them, because we all have stories. So if we pay attention and we use what unites us to bring us together, we're going to form an incredible community of girls out of order who are refusing to live The cycle of violence, the cycle of abuse, the cycle of denigration, it needs to stop, and it's stopping with people like you. And I have one final question. And me. Yes, you're right. And me. I will receive that. I have one final question for you. And I ask all my guests this, and I shamelessly rip this off from Jen Hatmaker, who has an award-winning podcast. But it's such a beautiful question, and it really helps our listeners get some more insight into you as a person. And it's the simple question is, what, Sabrina, is saving your life right now?
These podcasts, these podcasts, because I'm getting, I've done over 125 of them, and speaking engagements as well. But the hosts are so uh, they're so echoing what we're doing, what we're saying, and it's so encouraging. I have to say, because you could get pretty beat up in this. We're talking about safety and respect and abuse. I try to frame it in a positive way. So when we do these podcasts, it's so encouraging, and we're getting such positive feedback, and we're being told, you have our green light, go, 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 keep going, because we need you here in Malaysia, and we need you here in England, and we need you here in Australia, and we need you here in Washington state in the States. And it's because what we're doing is very new and very progressive and very bold. So when we hear all of this positive feedback, I welcome it, because uh it's hard what we're doing. It's difficult, it's challenging. So when we have
It is.
hosts like you and so many others, um I hope I answered the question. That's what's keeping me going, us going.
You did. You did. And I appreciate that. It's such a beautiful mission that you have, and you are making a difference. And I know that our listeners are going to receive this message and be more aware and not be afraid to speak up if it's their story as well. So thank you so, so
Thank
much.
you, Christine. Thank you.
Wow, that was such a powerful, powerful interview with the indomitable. I don't even know if I said that word. I think I added a syllable, but the incredible, the fierce Sabrina Oso. Sisters, I know this isn't a fun topic to talk about. It's not a fun topic to think about, but we cannot stick our heads in the sand. We need to pay attention to home violence. It's not just the black eyes and the broken arms. Sometimes it's the tearing apart of your self-worth. And we just finished a worthy journey. We didn't finish. We just went on a worthy journey on this podcast. And if we don't have our self-worth, we cannot fully live beautiful, compelling lives that we deserve and that we desire. And so pay attention. Ask yourself hard questions and pay attention to those around you. Listen to your gut and then speak up and speak out. People like Sabrina Oso are changing the world one survivor at a time. And we're in this together forever. Make sure you follow Sabrina. Please support her in her mission. I will put in the show notes everywhere you can find her. And we need to keep building tribes of girls out of order who never relent, never accept this type of abuse, and stand up for others who may not be able to stand up for themselves. We'll see you next time.